Ariel Castro, The Final Days of a Cleveland Kidnapper, The House That Wouldn't Stay Silent. If you think darkness ends when the bad guy is caught, think again. Hit subscribe before the next nightmare finds you. The night Ariel Castro was dragged out of his Seymour Avenue home, the entire street felt like it was holding its breath for the first time in a decade. Police cars cast flashing blue and red streaks across the cracked pavement. Neighbors huddled outside in disbelief, whispering the same words again and again. How could this happen here? But the story didn't end with the rescue. In many ways, that night was only the beginning. Inside the patrol car, Castro sat hunched and shaking, not from fear, but from something colder, deeper. Officers who transported him later described the ride as unnervingly silent. He didn't ask what charges he faced, didn't fight, didn't cry. He simply stared at his own reflection in the glass, his eyes wide and hollow, like he was trying to recognize the face staring back at him. When they booked him, he whispered to the intake officer, "I'm not a monster. I'm sick." No one answered. They didn't have to. In the city, the investigation unfolded like peeling back rotting wallpaper in an abandoned house. Room after room inside Castro's home revealed horrors people struggled to describe. The more detectives uncovered, the more the case gnawed at the edges of the public sanity. Even seasoned officers found themselves stepping outside for air. The walls of the house seemed to hold memories, the kind that cling to anyone brave enough to look too long. When Castro stood in court for the first time, shackled and surrounded by armed deputies, spectators expected rage or denial. But what they saw was something stranger. He was detached, almost absent. His confession came fast, and the words were chilling. He claimed he had built his own family, that he loved the victims, that he wasn't violent. The courtroom froze. The judge did not. Life plus 1,000 years. No parole. Not now. Not ever. As Castro was escorted out, he muttered something the microphones didn't catch. But one deputy heard it clearly. "They'll never let me live." His transfer to the correctional facility was done under the highest security level. Not because they feared he'd escape. No one believed he could. They feared what other inmates would do to him. Men who had committed every crime imaginable had already formed their opinions. Even in prison, lines were drawn, and Castro was on the far side of the darkest one. Prison officials placed him under protective custody, solitary confinement 23 hours a day. A small cell, a steel bed, a concrete floor. The kind of place meant to prevent violence. But it didn't prevent watching. Guards noticed he paced endlessly, muttering to himself, arguing with people who weren't there. At night, he refused to sleep unless the lights were on. "The walls move when it's dark," he told a guard. The man laughed at first, until he saw the look in Castro's eyes and realized Castro believed it. One evening, an officer doing rounds noticed something odd. Castro had covered the small window of his cell with toilet paper. Before the guard could order him to remove it, they heard a sound from inside, a thud, then a desperate scraping. The officer called for backup. 2 more guards rushed to the cell. When they opened the food slot, Castro froze, staring at them through the narrow opening with an expression none of them could explain. Not panic, not fear. Something more like anticipation. The toilet paper fell from the window as the guards ordered him to step back. But it wasn't the sight of Castro that made the officer's blood go cold. It was what he saw behind him on the wall above the bed, scratches. Fresh ones. Dozens of them. Not random. Not frantic. They formed words. "Not alone." The guards exchanged looks. Inmates in solitary didn't get tools. They didn't get metal. They didn't get anything sharp. And yet the message was carved deep. Too deep. The officer stepped away to radio his supervisor, but before he could finish the call, a second guard ran to the door, breathing hard. "Sir, there are more." He pointed down the corridor. "Every cell along this block. All the walls. Same message." And that was when everyone realized something wasn't right. Something in that wing had shifted. Something that shouldn't have. And Ariel Castro wasn't the only one awake. The block that started whispering. Some prisons hold inmates. Others hold something far older. The night the carved messages appeared, The prison went into immediate lockdown. Officers moved through the corridors briskly, flashlights cutting through the blue-toned darkness that always seemed thicker in the solitary wing. No alarms sounded. They didn't need to. The silence felt louder than any siren. Every step echoed, every radio click seemed too sharp, and even the guards whispered without knowing why. When the warden arrived, he stopped at the door of Castro's cell, staring at the carved message above the bed. Not alone. The grooves were deep, clean, too precise for fingernails. The warden scanned the room again, his jaw tightening. "Check every cell," he ordered. "Every wall." And when officers returned, they confirmed the impossible. The same phrase had appeared in 7 other solitary cells, all carved at the exact same height, the same angle, the same unnatural precision. But none of the inmates inside those cells claimed responsibility. Some refused to speak. Others swore the words were already there when they woke. One man, a lifer known for his calm demeanor, simply sat on his bed, rocking slightly, repeating the same quiet phrase. It was the tapping. It wouldn't stop tapping. The prison brought in maintenance to examine the walls, expecting to find some innocent explanation. But every expert left confused. The scratches weren't recent. They weren't shallow. They went deep into the concrete, deeper than hand tools could have reached in such a short time. But there were no tools, no loose screws, no hidden metal. And yet, the carvings were undeniably real. Over the next 48 hours, guards reported strange incidents, nothing dangerous, but unsettling enough to spread whispers among the staff. Radios crackled with brief bursts of static that sounded almost like voices. Lights in the corridor flickered in synchronized patterns no electrician could replicate. Metal doors vibrated faintly even when there was no movement inside. Still, no one connected these events to Castro until the surveillance review. 2 officers, working late, pulled up footage of his cell from the night before. They expected to see him carving the wall. But instead, between 2:14 a.m. and 2:16 a.m., the camera frame flickered, not out, just distorted. And when the picture stabilized again, the message was suddenly there. No movement, no figure, no sound, just changed. The technician replayed the moment several times before stepping back from the monitor with a pale face. "That's not a glitch," he whispered. "One frame, the wall is clean. Next frame, it's carved. Deep. Worse, something else was discovered. Behind the carved phrase, faint but visible under the right lighting, were older marks, like something had been trying to be erased, rewritten, or overwritten many times. As if the wall had a history, one nobody wanted to remember. The warden ordered that Castro be moved temporarily to an observation room for evaluation. But when guards arrived at his cell, they found him standing perfectly still in the center of the room, facing the corner. He didn't turn when they entered. He didn't move when they spoke. Only when they touched his shoulder did he slowly raise his head and whisper, "It followed you." And this time, the guards didn't laugh. The observation room. Some truths don't hide in the dark. They wait for someone to look directly at them. Guard Reyes had been in corrections for nearly 18 years, but he had never seen an inmate look the way Ariel Castro did that morning. Not angry, not rebellious, not manipulative. Just empty. They escorted him down the narrow hall into the medical observation room. Blue-white fluorescent lights hummed above, cutting long shadows across the floor. Castro didn't fight. He didn't question the move. He didn't even blink when they cuffed him to the steel bench inside the room. He just stared at the far wall with the uneasy calm of someone who knew more than he should. The prison psychologist, Dr. Emil Hartman, stepped in with a clipboard, expecting a routine evaluation. Within minutes, he knew it wouldn't be routine. "Mr. Castro," Hartman began gently, "the guards say you spoke of something following them. What did you mean by that?" Castro didn't answer, but his eyes flicked upward toward the ceiling camera. Not toward Hartman, not toward the guards, toward the camera. Hartman noted it, then tried again. "Are you hearing things? Seeing things?" Minutes stretched, cold and quiet. Finally, Castro whispered, barely audible, "I warned them not to look at the wall." Hartman stiffened. "What wall?" Castro slowly raised his eyes, staring past Hartman with an expression that made the room feel colder. "It doesn't like attention," he said. The psychologist stepped outside for a moment to speak with the officers. "He's not violent," Hartman explained, "but he's reacting to something real to him, likely a stress-induced." A loud crash cut him off. Every guard spun toward the door. Inside the room, Castro had thrown himself sideways off the bench, landing on the floor with his shoulder twisted under him. For a moment it looked like he was convulsing, but then they heard his voice, desperate, gasping, not screaming but pleading. "Turn it off. Turn it off." The guards rushed in, thinking he meant the lights, the noise, something physical. But Castro wasn't looking at the lights. He was staring directly into the lens of the ceiling camera. Hartman shouted for the control booth to kill the monitor feed. But the moment the order went out, something strange happened. The screen didn't turn off. Instead, the live feed from the observation room began to distort. Horizontal bands of static rolled down the screen. The image blurred, then sharpened, then blurred again. One frame showed Castro on the floor. The next frame showed something behind him, a shadow. The officers pushed harder on their radios. Booth shut it down now. But the feed refused to respond. The operator swore softly. "It's not me. The system, it's running on its own." Inside the room, Castro clawed at his restraints, trying to pull himself away from the camera's viewpoint. Tears streaked down his face, not from pain, but from terror. Hartman grabbed his shoulders. "Ariel, listen to me. Nothing is in this room with you." Castro's chest heaved. He shook his head rapidly. "You didn't see it. Not yet." His voice trembled uncontrollably. "But it saw you." Then the observation room monitor did something it had never done before. The feed rewound. Smoothly, silently, mechanically. Everyone froze. The camera replayed the last 15 seconds, backward, without any button being pressed. And this time, the shadow behind Castro was clearer. Not a figure, not a person, just an outline too tall, too thin, like a stretched silhouette standing at an impossible angle. Hartman stepped back from the screen, suddenly aware of his pulse pounding in his throat. "This isn't external tampering," he murmured. "Something inside the system is interfering." But the warden, who had just entered the control booth, said nothing. He stared at the final paused frame, the faint outline behind Castro, and felt something he had not felt inside a prison in 23 years of service. Fear. Back in the observation room, Castro went silent. Not calm, silent. Unable to speak. Unable to look away. Finally, he whispered, so quietly the nearby microphone barely caught it. "It never wanted me." A long, cold pause. It wanted the building. And the warden, for the first time, believed him.
The last inspection. Walls don't talk unless someone forces them to. The morning after the incident in the observation room, the prison buzzed with an energy no one wanted to acknowledge. Officers walked faster. Radios stayed louder. Even inmates kept their voices low, as if something invisible had passed through the corridors overnight and left a chill in the air. Ariel Castro had not slept. Every guard who peeked into his cell saw him sitting upright on his mattress, hands folded, back straight, eyes fixed on a single point beneath the vent, as still as a statue. He didn't ask for water. He didn't ask for his meal. He didn't move. The warden called a meeting at noon. Only 4 people were invited. Warden Patrick Morgan, Dr. Emil Hartman, Sergeant Reyes, and the internal investigator, Denise Carter. Carter was known for tearing apart lies with the precision of a surgeon. Her files were thick, her questions sharper than any blade in the prison's evidence locker. She entered the room with a single folder tucked under her arm, the new one, Castro's. "Let's start simple," she said, dropping the folder onto the conference table. "What exactly happened with the camera feed?" Reyes spoke first. "The system glitched. That's all. Old wiring, interference, whatever." "It didn't glitch," Hartman interrupted. His tone was calm, but his hands were trembling. "The feed reversed direction. Cameras don't do that unless someone programs them to." Carter leaned back. "So you're saying someone tampered with the surveillance system?" Hartman swallowed hard. "I'm saying someone inside might have." The room froze. Because that meant only 2 possibilities. A correctional employee committed a crime. Or an inmate found a way to access a system that even officers weren't fully trained to operate. Carter opened the folder. You know what the broadcasters are waiting for? The scandal. If this case leaks, it won't just be Castro they're talking about. It'll be all of you. Reyes clenched his jaw. No one's leaking anything. Good, Carter said, closing the folder. Then we need answers before this place tears itself open. The warden stood. We'll perform a full inspection of the unit. Cameras, wiring, interview logs, guard shifts. If any of you think someone's covering their tracks, tell me now. No one spoke. But all four of them were thinking the same thing. Something wasn't right about the last 24 hours. Not with Castro. Not with the staff. And not with the prison itself. The inspection. The team moved through the unit after lockdown. The hall was quiet, lit only by the pale blue emergency lights that flickered every few seconds. They started with the control booth. Everything looked normal, at first. Then Carter noticed a problem. A single command had been typed into the system at 2:17 a.m. A system reset request. But not from any console inside the booth. It came from camera line 3. Directly from the hardware in the wall. Cameras don't send commands, Reyes said slowly. Unless someone rewired them, Carter replied. The warden's voice dropped. You're telling me someone physically accessed the system? The booth operator rubbed his forehead. But those wires are inside the wall. You'd need special tools, clearance, and at least an hour without anyone noticing. Reyes stared at the wall-mounted camera above them. That's impossible. Carter stepped closer, running her fingers along the panel. She tapped one corner and it clicked. The metal shifted under her hand. A loose panel. Reyes ripped it open. Inside the wall, a bundle of rewired circuits stared back at them. Wires rerouted, connections spliced, ports exposed. Whoever had done it knew exactly where to cut, where to reattach, and how to manipulate the feed without triggering alarms. Carter exhaled sharply. This wasn't an inmate job. This was expert level. The warden's face turned pale. Which means it was one of ours. Before anyone could respond, a radio crackled. Warden? You need to come to cell 19. Now. The warden grabbed the radio. What's wrong? There was a long, tense silence. Then. It's Castro. He wrote something on the wall. The group rushed down the hall. The blue-toned lights flickered as they approached his cell. When they stopped in front of cell 19, the officer on duty pointed shakily inside. Castro sat in the same position, rigid, hands folded. But behind him, sprawling across the concrete wall in jagged letters scraped with a meal tray. Check the tapes. We are not alone. And for the first time, even the toughest officers felt fear crawl up their spine. Because the security cameras didn't just monitor the prison. They were starting to communicate. And whatever message was coming, it wasn't finished. The corridor of silence. And just when they thought the nightmare was over, it cracked open again. The message on Ariel Castro's wall spread through the prison faster than any rumor ever had. Check the tapes. We are not alone. 3 guards refused to finish their shifts. Another requested reassignment. Even Warden Morgan, a man who had spent 32 years around killers, walked with a stiffness he couldn't hide. But Castro, he didn't speak, blink, or acknowledge anyone. He just sat there, breathing, waiting. Internal investigator Denise Carter insisted they isolate him immediately and review every second of surveillance from the past month. But when the warden approved the request and the IT team attempted to pull the encrypted backups, they made a discovery that froze the entire room. 2 weeks of video data were missing. Wiped clean. Not corrupted. Not glitched. Deleted. Carter slammed her hands on the table. This is not incompetence. Someone covered their tracks. Reyes leaned forward, voice shaking. But who knew Castro was going to write that message? Who knew we'd even go looking? No one answered. Because the truth was becoming undeniable. Someone with deep technical knowledge, access, and intent had manipulated the surveillance system long before Castro ever entered the prison. But why? The final night. That same night, just after 11 p.m., the prison went into a lockdown that wasn't scheduled. The lights dimmed. Doors sealed. Officers were ordered to remain in their assigned posts. No explanations were given. Carter, who happened to be inside the unit, immediately sensed something was wrong. Who authorized this lockdown? She asked a nearby guard. He swallowed. We don't know. The command came through the central channel. She grabbed his radio and attempted to patch into the warden's frequency. No response. Only static. That was when the hallway lights began flickering, one by one, like a countdown. Carter and Reyes sprinted toward cell 19. When they reached Castro's door, he was standing for the first time in days, directly in the center of his cell, facing them, hands unclenched, breathing slow and steady. "Castro!" Reyes shouted. Back against the wall. But Castro didn't move. Instead, he tilted his head, eyes narrowing slightly as if listening to something neither of them could hear. Then the power went out. Blackness swallowed the corridor. Shouting erupted. Radios crackled. Boots thundered against concrete. A generator hummed to life, flooding the hallway with dim blue emergency light. And in that faint glow, Carter saw something that made her step back. Castro was no longer standing. He was slumped against the wall, unconscious. The officer nearest the cell opened the door. "We need medical." He froze mid-sentence. Castro's neck was pressed against the bottom of his bedsheet, twisted into a loop tied to the frame. A makeshift ligature. Reyes dropped to one knee, checking his pulse. "He's still breathing, get medical now." But Carter wasn't looking at Castro. She was looking at the floor. A small square piece of plastic lay inches from his hand. A broken segment of a pen barrel. A hollow tube. The exact type of object someone could use, not to harm themselves, but to breathe even when a sheet was pulled tight. A decoy. A staged ligature. "Reyes," she whispered. "He didn't do this." Reyes looked up, breath trembling. "Then who?" Before he could finish, a voice shouted from the far end of the hall. "Check the camera feed. Now." The truth cracks open. They rushed into the control booth. Officers were clustered around the monitors, faces pale. On the replay, at the exact minute the lights went out, cell 19's camera flickered. But not off. It switched angles. An angle no camera in the prison was programmed to capture. A low, diagonal shot from the corner of the ceiling. As if a second hidden camera had been installed inside the cell. And on that grainy, bluish footage, they watched a silhouette enter Castro's room in the darkness. Not an inmate. Not Castro. A correctional officer. A tall figure with a pulled-up hood, gloves, and a badge clipped to their belt. The figure pressed something over Castro's mouth, tied the sheet around his neck, positioned the pen barrel in his hand, then walked out calmly, as if performing a scheduled chore. Carter's stomach dropped. "That's not suicide. That's an execution." Reyes stared at the screen, jaw tight. Someone wanted him silenced. Permanently. Carter leaned closer. "Zoom in. The badge. Maybe we can." The screen froze. The footage stopped. Then vanished. A message blinked across the monitor. "Access revoked." The booth operator backed away. I didn't do that. I swear I didn't." But the truth was clear. Someone with full administrative authority was watching them in real time. And they were shutting the case down. The final twist. Hours later, as dawn broke over the prison yard, the official report was released. Ariel Castro, found unresponsive, death by suicide. Carter slammed the report shut. "This is a cover-up. And someone inside this prison is part of it." Reyes nodded. "So what do we do?" Carter stared at the empty hallway outside her office. "We start by finding out why Castro wrote that message." Reyes swallowed. "You think he saw something?" "No," Carter said quietly. "I think someone showed him something." Later that evening, she returned to the control booth alone. As she walked past the row of monitors, one screen, a blank and used display, flickered on. Blue static. Then an image. A still frame from the night Castro died. The hooded officer. Standing in cell 19. Facing the camera directly. And slowly, the figure lifted a finger to where their mouth would be and made a gesture. Silence. Before the screen went dark again. Carter took 2 steps back, heart pounding. Someone was sending her a message. Not from the past. From now. From inside the prison. And as she stared at the blank monitor, she realized the most chilling truth of all. Ariel Castro wasn't the only one who wasn't supposed to talk. She was next.